A dramatic turn in the ongoing political rubric in Wisconsin tonight. You hear the words, nobody saw that coming, way more than events actually warrant. But in this case, really, nobody saw this coming. There's breaking news out of Wisconsin tonight, where what had been an extremely close race for Supreme Court between conservative incumbent Justice David Prosser and challenger Joanne Kloppenburg is now less close after an entire town's votes were reportedly not included in the initial tally, but then they were mysteriously found today. It happened in Waukesha County, the most conservative large county in Wisconsin by a mile. The county clerk in Waukesha County says she did not put the vote totals from one whole city in that county into the final totals she reported to the media. The town is called Brookfield, Wisconsin, population 39,000. Its votes reportedly went quite dramatically for the conservative incumbent justice, David Prosser. And that means that even though the Associated Press had Joanne Kloppenburg in the lead in this race by a couple of hundred votes last night, right now she appears to be unexpectedly over 7,000 votes behind. Yes, that is still an unofficial count. How did such a massive mistake happen, and how should we understand it? Well, according to the county clerk, she says she forgot to hit the save button on the relevant file. Here's her explanation tonight.
I discovered that the data that was sent to me from the city of Brookfield was not transferred to the final report that was given to the media on Tuesday night. The city of Brookfield cast 14,315 votes on April 5th. 10,859 votes went for Justice David Prosser, and 3,456 went for Joanne Kloppenburg. These numbers will be reflected in my official results. It is important to stress that this is not a case of extra votes or extra ballots being found. This is human error, which I apologize for. This was a Access database file that was on our regular system, and it was just a matter of the save, and it was just human error. Again, I apologize.
Has there been an error like this large, ever before in Waukesha County?
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of. Joining us now is Mordecai Lee, professor of government affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Professor Lee is also a former member of the Wisconsin State Assembly and the State Senate. Professor, thanks very much for your time tonight.
Thanks for inviting me.
What do you make of the explanation for these missing votes reappearing today? Does this seem to make sense to you?
Not really. It's awfully bizarre. In a clip that wasn't part of what you showed, she claimed that they didn't use the form she sent them, that they amended her template. I don't understand. How can she hand out a template that other people can play with? This really raises basic questions about the professionalism there. It just sort of struck me as amateur hour.
Is Waukesha County in particular, or Wisconsin broadly speaking, does it have a history of shenanigans about voting, or incompetence about voting, or other things that should help the national audience understand whether or not this late announcement today is something to worry about or just something to wonder about?
This is something to wonder and worry about. I mean, we're not Chicago in 1960 or Texas in 1948 when they stole elections, but 7,500 votes, that's a ton. I've been involved in Wisconsin politics since the late 60s, and I have never seen an election that had such a major mistake. You know, she was questioned by an audit about her IT system back last year by the county government, and she haughtily claimed that she could just have a freestanding PC. I think this is an indication of incompetence, and I don't even understand why we elect partisan county clerks. Isn't it time for civil service and public administration to run our elections?
The county clerk in this case, you can see on the screen here right now, is both elected and it is a partisan position?
Unbelievably. I mean, how can there be a supposedly Republican way to run elections or Democratic way? That's such 19th century America. We really need to professionalize those offices, and elections are the basis of democracy. And here in Wisconsin, we like to think of ourselves as dull and staid and straightforward, and for the last 60 days, every day we've woken up to another sort of jaw-dropping story, but this tops the cake. I just can't believe it.
There has been a lot of national attention on this local election. I mean, here we are in primetime national cable news talking about a dramatic turn in a state Supreme Court election in Wisconsin. But that's because this has been seen as essentially a proxy vote on the union stripping measures and the tactics of the Republican Party in Wisconsin, which have been so dramatic this year. Substantively, does the winner of this race have a substantive effect on the fate of Governor Walker's union stripping law?
The answer is yes. This was not a symbolic election. This was an election for the swing vote on our 7-member state Supreme Court. Right now, with Justice Prosser there's an ideological majority of 4 conservatives. If he were to be replaced, there'd be an ideological majority of, I guess you'd say, left of center progressives. So this was really a vote about whether the collective bargaining bill, if it reaches the state Supreme Court, is going to be upheld or rejected.
Former Wisconsin State Senator Mordecai Lee, who is now a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Thank you very much for helping us sort through this. We know that it is not over. We may be talking to you again, sir.
Okay,
my favorite political blogger, my favorite daily news and politics blogger is a guy named Steve Bennin. Steve Bennin writes at WashingtonMonthly.com. Washington Monthly is lucky to have him, and frankly, if Steve would uproot his comfortable life and move to New York City, I would steal him away from them. But Steve will not do that, and he is doing great at Washington Monthly. But today, Steve took a look at the Wisconsin election story, this story that is so hinky. And as he often does, he nailed it. He said, quote, "Imagine there was a close, important race and the conservative candidate eked out a narrow win, and the very next day a Democratic donor with a sketchy election record discovered 7,000 additional votes for the liberal. What do you suppose we'd hear from the right under those circumstances?" Ding, 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 ding. Exactly. He's talking about the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin, the first statewide election since the great Republican union stripping overreach of 2011, a political proxy war between a former Republican state legislator, conservative incumbent justice who Scott Walker said he would vote for, and an outsider challenger backed by everyone who was mad at Scott Walker for his union stripping thing. After David Prosser, the conservative, finished 30 points ahead of his nearest challenger in the primary just a month and a half ago, interest in challenger Joanne Kloppenburg surged on a wave of anti-Republican sentiment in the state. Would it be enough to give her a huge upset victory over this incumbent conservative judge? We don't know. By the time election night was over, there was no clear winner. By the time the AP was saying 100% of precincts reporting, Ms. Kloppenburg had a couple of hundred votes lead. She declared victory, and it looked like a recount was imminent. But then, out of the blue, a day late, the court clerk from the largest conservative county in the state announced that she had turned up an extra 14,000 votes that she didn't count before, and that those votes, voila, gave the conservative incumbent justice a 7,000 vote lead.
I'm apologizing. It's human error. Human error. It was just human error. This is human error, which I apologize for, which is common in this process.
Before becoming Waukesha County Clerk in 2002, Kathy Nickolaus spent 13 years working as a computer specialist for the State Assembly Republican Caucus. That is one of 4 partisan groups that was dismantled in a Wisconsin political scandal that sent a number of politicians to jail. Kathy Nickolaus made an immunity deal for herself with prosecutors in that case. She has since refused to answer questions about her role in it. For part of her time in that job, though, Kathy Nickolaus's boss in the Assembly was the conservative candidate in this Supreme Court election, David Prosser. Once she became county clerk of the largest conservative county in the state in 2004, dozens of voters in that county were given the wrong ballots in a primary election. Their votes were counted anyway. The following year, in 2005, Kathy Nickolaus was headlined as red-faced after she gave local papers sample ballots for a county executive election that were pre-marked with a vote for one of the candidates. Ms. Nickolaus blamed human error. The year after that, in 2006, Ms. Nickolaus's county was plagued with a whole slew of botched election problems with some familiar details. One candidate who had been shown to be winning actually lost. One of the reasons for the mistake, an entire city's data had been misrecorded. The next year, in 2007, another candidate in a Kathy Nickolaus election went through the same you won, no you lost thing when late in the process, Kathy Nickolaus figured out that some votes had been missed, which happened to swing the election the other way. 3 months ago, Waukesha County audited Kathy Nickolaus's operation and recommended that she improve her security and backup procedures. She would not commit to doing it. She said she would only take the suggestions into consideration. None of this county clerk's record says this election has been hinked with. But what was it that Steve Bennett said about this? Imagine there was a close, important race and the conservative candidate eked out a narrow win, and the very next day, a Democratic donor with a sketchy election record discovered 7,000 additional votes for the Liberal. What do you suppose we would hear from the right under those circumstances? Exactly. Joining us again tonight is Mordecai Lee. He's a professor of government affairs at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Professor Lee is also a former member of the Wisconsin State Assembly and the Wisconsin State Senate. Professor Lee, thanks very much for your time. It's good to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me back.
Let me first ask if I got any of that history wrong. It was it was a quick political history of Waukesha County. Did I say anything wrong? Did it sound like to you?
You know, Rachel, I think you know Waukesha political history better than I do. There were one or two stories there that I wasn't familiar with, but you really nailed it.
It is reported that state election officials are now on their way to Waukesha County to review Kathy Nickolaus's tallying procedures from the night she missed an entire city's 14,000 votes. Do you have confidence that state election officials can sort this out?
I do have confidence, and it's exactly for the same reason of what we talked about last night. The State Elections Board is now governed by a nonpartisan board of retired judges. And so instead of it being a partisan board of, let's say, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, we know that this is nonpartisan, civil service, straight down the middle of the road, professional public administration. So if Kevin Kennedy's sort of flying squad comes back and says it's okay, then I'll believe it. But I wouldn't believe it if it were a partisan-controlled kind of deputation.
This latest mistake notwithstanding, there have been a lot of issues. Waukesha County has had issues big enough to make the papers, at least that we found in the archives in 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, now 2011, all under Ms. Nickolaus's leadership as the person in charge of elections in that county. Is that an unusual record? Do all counties have these kinds of discrepancies in almost every election?
You know, professors sometimes take too long to say things, so I'll give you a one-word answer: no. This is very unusual. This is exceptional. I've never seen any story with so many rounds, and each time that she says it was just a mistake. I think after a while one starts seeing a pattern.
Some people who have crunched the numbers on this, including Nate Silver, who's been very good on making political statistics make sense to laymen. Some people who've looked at this say that statistically the revised results from Waukesha seem sound. They don't seem like statistical outliers. They look like real numbers. Do you concur with that?
I think that's very good analysis. And in fact, Craig Gilbert from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel came up with the same results. So I think that these are trustworthy results, but it's just so stunningly surprising that's why everybody just sort of has a kind of, are you sure that's okay? It's really interesting the way you introduced the segment. In terms of what if the shoe was on the other foot. And it really reminds me not just of Wisconsin politics, but Washington, D.C. politics, that Democrats think they're right, but Republicans know they're right. They never have any doubt. They're great on message. They're fabulous at how they communicate. And Democrats just always seem to be behind the game.
Former Wisconsin State Senator and Democrat Mordecai Lee, now a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, a man who knows of which he speaks. Thank you for joining us again tonight. I really appreciate it, sir.